everyone, to the Gary and Kenny Show live. This is the first time we've done a live broadcast where we can interact with our viewers and listeners, can ask questions live. We've got some questions that have already come in because we have a tremendous guest who'll be coming in just a moment. Mark Gordon, the venerable producer, will be on just a moment. But meanwhile, Kenny, how do you feel? How's it going so far?
Well, it's good. I think we should bring Mark on right away.
You want to bring him on right away and chat?
Right
yeah,
away.
sure. Yeah,
Mark,
okay.
Let's introduce.
All right.
See, I want people to know, some people who haven't seen the show or know anything, Gary and I, what we call this the Gary and Kenny Show, are two show business veterans who like to share stories about our experiences. And we have a lot of our friends come on and who are also in the business, in the industry, and talk about their experiences.
Wow,
and
you ought to do the lead in every time. Seriously, you should say
so it should really be the
Kenny
show.
And Gary Show.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah, let's flip that around. Well, all right. Let me introduce Mark.
So please.
Because I seem to know more about his credits than you do. Mark, whenever it comes up, what are his credits? Kenny fumbles. But immediately I think of Saving Private Ryan. I think of Speed. I think of The Patriot. I think of Murder on the Orient Express. Molly's Game, in television, Grey's Anatomy, Criminal Minds, Ray Donovan, a host of other shows. So your expertise as a producer, executive producer, is really something extraordinary. You've been on the show before, and that was a tremendous success for us. So now here you are live.
There he is.
I'm
live.
happy to be alive. I can tell you, I just had my 65th birthday a couple of weeks ago, and I am feeling full of vim and vigor. Yes, I am.
Just for the record, people should know that we're using a special filter on Mark because he actually is he's got incredible hair. He's about 6'2", blonde hair. So we just did this to protect his,
Look at that. Look at that. Somebody gave me a thumbs up. Who did that? Was that Adam?
Hey, I don't know, but you got a thumbs up. Hey, look, we're kind of.
I have a question before we start.
Yes.
Yeah, go. We've started.
How come you have a bigger microphone than Kenny?
Kenny hides his big microphone. Kenny he has the same microphone, but he hides it. I like people to see my microphone.
I like it too. It makes me feel like it's, Edward R. Murrow time.
Exactly. It feels like an interview show because I have him. There's Kenny's mic.
Oh, Ken.
All right. Kenny, hide that thing.
Your face. That's no
hide
good.
that thing. Hide that thing.
Anyway, can I ask another question before we go on? Mark, this is for you, actually. Are we going to be using the Jeffrey Toobin protocols for this show? Could you explain?
First of all, I've met Mr. Toobin.
Oh,
was he wearing pants?
He was wearing pants. It was at a cocktail party. He got a little carried away with himself. We all have different things that turn us on, and I guess he let things get out of control, which is unfortunate because he's a very, very bright and talented man.
I like him very much.
He's back on CNN, am I correct?
Yeah, I believe he is. Well, every new technology, and Zoom was kind of new, obviously, to most of us a year ago. There's always a seminal, no pun intended, mistake that someone makes that sort of resets the bar and how we approach this. So
in other words, we're okay with people masturbating during the show.
So in other words, just go right ahead. Go right, and you don't have to turn the camera off.
Mark, do you want to opt out?
I just want you to know that I won't be doing that.
Oh,
all right. So we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants here. We haven't done this live before. I already have some questions coming up. I want to make sure you guys all comfortable and happy.
I'm very comfortable and happy.
Mark, I thought you were in LA the last time you did our show. That whole time, I just thought you were LA producer. Oh, you were?
I was in Montecito, which is very close to LA.
Okay, but now you're in New York.
Now I'm in NYC, yes.
Now I'm gonna go off script for a moment because I just realized something. We should be talking about the event that just happened in New Mexico, just for a little bit, to start off with, because that's a big issue.
Well,
I'd like to get Mark's thoughts. Mark's done movies that mostly have had guns and weapons and shooting and all that stuff. And if anybody should know about protocols regarding what happened with the Alec Baldwin movie, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it, Mark.
Well, it's pretty surprising that this happened, that it could happen, because there's so many safeguards that are regularly in place to keep this from happening. So the armorer, opens up the gun, make sure that there's nothing in the chamber, make sure there's nothing in the barrel of the gun, multiple checks on that. Then he'll hand it to the prop guy, who will do the same, who will hand it to the first assistant director, who will do the same, stunt coordinator, depending upon the nature of the, but I mean, there are 3 or 4 people who have to check these guns before they're handed to the actor. So the fact that there was, now my understanding is, and I don't know that it's official yet, but that there was when they say a live round, it can mean an actual bullet with a projectile on it, or it can mean a blank.
Right.
And I get confused myself sometimes about the terminology. But the fact is that there was supposed to be, from what I understand, nothing in the gun. The other thing obviously they weren't shooting. So the fact that he fired the gun, again, I don't know all the facts, but
right.
I think that they were by the camera, and he wasn't on camera when he was Alec Baldwin. He wasn't on camera when he shot. There's no clarity here, but it is surprising. Although I will say that as you all know, there was a number of the crew walked off a few hours beforehand. They were racing. They were going too fast. There's just been a negotiation between the IA and the motion picture producers, although they're actually not producers, they're the studios. It's kind of an odd thing that they call them producers, but nonetheless, where they were negotiating just these kinds of things, how many hours they were shooting in a day, mm-hmm. How long would people have to drive home? They were shooting evidently in Santa Fe, and they lived in Albuquerque, and so there was, an hour and a half to 2 hours or plus a day driving back and forth to the location. According to what I've read, they were supposed to be housed locally. So this is what happens on these lower budget productions. They don't have enough time, they don't have enough money, and that's how accidents happen.
Mark,
but this one seems pretty crazy.
Yeah, Mark, what situation would a film use a live round? I mean, not just a blank, but a projectile.
If you were behind an actor and you're not firing toward the camera, there have been live rounds used for targets and things like that. Every production is different. Sometimes there are special effects, floor effects that are used in the dirt to create things. Again, it's a budgetary issue sometimes, and I'm not sure what the law or the rules are about when you can use live ammunition or actual bullets.
I'm going to ask you about, first of all, Saving Private Ryan must have been unbelievable in terms of the number of protocols and number of armorers and somebody handling weapons.
Oh my gosh. But there's a case where we were a big studio picture. We had the money to do it right. When you have no money, you do, it's a lot more expensive to rig something in the ground. A bullet hit or a something in the ground, not a person, obviously. It's a lot cheaper to shoot a gun at it.
Sure.
Than it is to set up a whole series of
scripts
and bullet hits to show that on camera.
What about CGI? How does that compare in price?
Well, that's more expensive, so the actual shooting of the bullet is the cheapest way to go, but it's also the most dangerous.
Well, we can. I'm just going to say all we can do is speculate at this point. The information hasn't all come in.
There's a little bit of. My son works for Cavalry Media. Cavalry Media one of the chief, the founders is Matt Del Piano, who is one of the producers on this movie, and Joel Souza is a client of my son, who is a director. So, I mean, there's some rumors. He didn't really offer any insight other than he's spoken to Joel about it. And the poor guy is, he's out of the hospital, but he's going to be in years of rehab, and just it's devastating. But one thing that we were talking about was completion bonds in this type of situations. Supposedly, they only had 1 week of shooting to finish the movie. Mark, do you think this movie can be completed? And is there a responsibility by the bond company?
Well, I don't know what their contract says.
Right.
Somebody's on the hook for that money, and obviously there's insurance. As we know, insurance is complicated. Will the insurance pay? Will they find negligence? I mean, there's just so many questions that none of us could even speculate about, because I don't know. We don't know what happened. And
I don't know whether or not time will go by, and if they think that there'll be enough time that they'll be able to come back and finish the movie. It's anybody's
Well, they'll
guess,
be able to finish it. It's just a question of who's going to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Somebody's got to. I mean, look, they've got whatever the movie cost. If they don't finish it, it has no value. And I hate to be talking about things like that when we're dealing with somebody's, loss of life.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
But believe me, there are lawyers and accountants and insurance companies and bond companies all trying to figure out what they should do,
mm-hmm.
and what is their fiscal responsibility. Unfortunately, the idea of shutting the movie down as to honor the woman who was killed is not at the top of the list of these people, because their responsibility is financial, and it's unfortunate, but that's show business, and it's it's very sad what happened. I mean, that's all I can say. It's just horrible.
Well, we'll be paying attention and reading the news as it comes in. Well,
let's get interactive. Let's
get interactive. I mean, that's a very serious subject. And here's a rather lighthearted question for you, Mark. Shannon M writes, "Dear Mark, did you get a lot of complaints about Kenneth Branagh's mustache in Murder on the Orient Express?"
That's a good question. Honestly, I don't know. I don't pay attention to those things after the movies come out. There's really nothing to be done. But it was certainly a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The mustache was a character in the film. Didn't have its own dressing
unintentionally,
room, but it was a character in the movie, and some people really loved it. Obviously, Ken did. He not only was he the star, but he was the director. And some people were concerned that it made too much of a statement and that it was too big. So the answer is I don't know, but I would be curious to know. Obviously, Shannon has some opinion about the mustache, and I would be very curious to know what Shannon's opinion of the mustache is.
Well, we'll see if we hear from Shannon. My guess is that it was a distraction, or she wouldn't have asked the question.
Yeah, that's a good guess.
I don't know about this first name, but CS, following up on that, CS Curve asks,
yes.
The big question is, when is Death on the Nile finally coming out?
That's a good question. I wish I knew the answer, but I don't know. There have been a number of dates that have been discussed. Obviously, it's been complicated by the situation with Armie Hammer. And I do not know the answer, but obviously the movie's been finished for quite some time, and we are just waiting to see what the Walt Disney Company, which now owns Fox, decides when and how to release the picture. But it's obviously complicated
because of Armie Hammer.
Because of Armie Hammer and the allegations made against him.
Right.
Yes.
Armie Hammer's the baking soda, right? Correct.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was a connection there. I don't know.
There is not, actually.
I'm sure the parents thought it was a good pun, right?
No, his
right.
grandfather was Armand Hammer, but no connection.
But no connection to Bangor. Here's another Shannon and a different Shannon who is
Dirty with Shannon's here today.
a lot of Shannons today. And
Shannon.
I'm married to a Shannon, and one of them could be my Shannon. In fact,
Wow.
I think this one is
but
because
not your Sharona, am I correct?
But not my Sharona.
Okay.
This one is about Grey's Anatomy, and my wife, she binge watches Grey's Anatomy. She cannot get enough of Grey's Anatomy. Question for Mark. Why does Grey's Anatomy have so many Silence of the Lamb references? Is that an inside joke with the writers or the cast?
I don't know. I seem to be saying I don't know a lot today.
Yeah, three in a row.
My guess.
That's what his lawyer told him.
I think you got the wrong guy here. I got to be honest with you. I could.
Are you aware of all the references?
I'm not. I'm not paying close enough attention. You know, I have to say honestly that the show's now in its 18th year.
Yes.
It is doing obviously extremely well. I don't know if it's the longest running drama on television, but it's certainly up there with Bonanza or some other shows. And I think that Law and Order was on for quite some time. And my involvement in the show day to day is pretty minimal. You know, Shonda Rhimes and I, Betsy Beers, were the original executive producers involved in the show. We made the pilot. Shonda ran the show as the showrunner for a number of years. She's no longer the showrunner. And my involvement day to day is fairly minimal. You know, part of what and not everybody works this way, but part of what I do as a non-writing producer on a dramatic television show is to really help launch that show, which I did with Grey's Anatomy, to stick around for a while. And sometimes the best thing that a producer can do is do no harm. And in this case, the show has been, I don't want to say running itself because some incredibly talented people have been doing that, but my involvement day to day has been pretty limited. And in this case, not that anybody asked me, but there's just my job is to leave them alone at this point and let them do what they're doing because they're doing great. And the only thing that I might be able to do is come in and make a mess. So
I have a question from Gianna Mulis. I'm bringing it up because she also wants to know about Criminal Minds and Grey's Anatomy.
Okay.
In his opinion, why does he think the TV shows Criminal Minds and Grey's Anatomy were such massive hits? And what was so special about those shows that compels viewers to keep watching?
I don't know. No, I'm just kidding.
Next.
You should ask my wife. She'll give you all these answers.
Here's what I can tell you. We certainly had no idea when we were making the pilot and the first few episodes before it went on the air. As far as Grey's is concerned, we shot all the first year episodes prior to the time that the show premiered. So we really had no idea. You know, with Grey's, Shonda Rhimes is an incredible writer, an incredible storyteller, and she seems to have created characters that people fell in love with and wanted to hang with every week. You know, obviously it's above and beyond that. They were, you know, I shouldn't just say great characters, spectacular characters and stories that captured the imagination of the audience. And I think it really ultimately comes down to that.
I think it was also unique in the way it introduced popular music into the show.
Well, that was certainly part of it, you know, and again, I give her credit for that. The way the show was made, she had a vision. And even though she had never produced a movie before or produced television before, she knew what she wanted. And as I said before, I had made a number of films and a number of films for television prior to that time. And I could see right away that her vision for the show was clear, and that my job was to help her find her vision as opposed to imposing my own. And I was hopefully smart enough or lucky enough or whatever to stay out of the way and let her do her job, because that's what made the show so special, is her singular way of seeing the world, writing the characters, writing the show, and making it.
And now, another show that you was Criminal Minds.
Yes.
Go ahead.
And I would say that, again, you go back to the voice of the creator.
Jeff Davis, was that his name?
Jeff Davis, yes. You know, I had no particular fondness for serial criminals. It wasn't a fascination of mine. I hadn't read a lot of books about them. I mean, I was curious like everybody, but not in a big way. Jeff was so well versed as a writer, as a storyteller, as an investigator, that he came up with an incredible way of telling the story. There have been lots of shows about serial criminals before. We've seen them, we've seen movies, but it was the format, it was the way the story was told. Richard Shepard, who directed the pilot, did a terrific job, as did Peter Horton on Grey's Anatomy. And it was, people are fascinated by that subject matter, and we cast actors who the audience wanted to be with. And we told a different, interesting story every week, some more interesting than others. And it also had a 15, 16-year run, which is incredible. I have been incredibly fortunate in my career to have these two crazy long-running shows.
Well, and you just answered your own question about why they last so long. They are characters that people grow with, that they want to see. My wife always says she loves the fact that she's watched these characters get older
and grow up.
She really appreciates it and grow up. A question came in here. Is there a medical procedure on Grey's Anatomy, obviously, that you would not do on the show because maybe it's too gory? That's from David K.
David K.
David K.
Hello, David. I'm sure there are lots of them. I'm not a doctor, nor do I speak regularly to the medical consultants on the show. But I'm sure that there have been over the years things. Look, the fact of the matter is we have the opportunity to put the camera where we want to and tell the story the way we want to. So I suspect that there's nothing conceptually that would be too gory. It's just about how you choose to depict whatever the horrible thing that, we've had trees going through people. I mean, there's been some crazy stuff there. There's been some crazy stuff.
Mark Hendrickson.
Mark, good man. Hello, Mark.
You are credited as producer or produced by on these films, but there's typically multiple producers. What is the difference? Is everybody doing? Basically, his question is, what is the specific rule of all these individual producers?
A lot of names go by.
There are a lot of names. You know what? It depends. Unfortunately, as the former president of the Producers Guild and someone who helped to create the code of credits in film, the PGA mark, if you see it on the screen in film, it denotes the person who actually produced the movie. And producing the movie can, includes, among other things, from beginning to end, someone who hired the original writer, who came up with the idea, who bought the book, took the idea from its inception all the way through to the marketing and release of the movie and everything in between, working with the director, working in post-production, working in marketing, being on the set. And you don't have to do all of those jobs in order to be credited as a bona fide producer, but you have to do enough of them that your contribution is meaningful to the making of the movie. In television, it's a little more complicated because many credits in television, executive producer credits, co-executive producer credits, go to writers. And there's always been a question about, how do you credit a writer as far as their responsibility for the television show. There are a lot of writers who get producer credits on a television show who don't have anything to do with the producing of the show. Some of that is due to, over a period of time. Oh, we don't have any more money to pay you, but we'll give you a higher level producer credit. There are a lot of showrunners who believe, and I understand it, that making a television show, unlike a movie, requires a village. And therefore, that village, even if one person isn't in the editing room or on the set or doing what would have been, traditional producerial duties like on a film, they are part of the producing team. And so television is much, much more complicated, but generally produced by is the highest level producer credit you can get on a movie, and executive producer is the same highest level on a television show.
Adam asks, what happens when a producer, maybe we would say let's say an executive producer, becomes unreliable in the middle of a project? Is that a scenario that
he can relate to?
We killed him.
You kill them, absolutely.
But we don't actually. The studio. You know what? That happens sometimes. Just like any person working on any project can become unreliable. Look, ultimately, 99% of the time, the people who have the power, financial power, are the people who put up the money. And if they feel that that producer is either technically in breach of contract or otherwise, or not performing their duties, they can remove them and bring somebody else in. And oftentimes the director, depending upon who that director is, has creative control over the project, whether contractual or implied. And that director has many times asked a producer to leave the set, you've heard the expression thrown off the set. Well, many a producer has been thrown off the set by a director, and many a producer has been thrown off the set by another producer. And I can say, without getting into too much detail, I myself have been thrown off a set.
I was just going to ask.
Who felt that my presence was inhibiting their good work. And so it happens. It happens.
Here's a question from Perry. Good question.
Hello, Perry.
What producers influenced you the most?
And what's in that canteen?
It's actually gin.
Okay.
And I'm feeling pretty great right now.
Good.
What producers influenced me the most? It's funny because the producer that probably most influenced me was actually, though he was a producer, I think only once in his career did he ever take a producer credit, and that's Irving Thalberg. Irving Thalberg was the great studio executive who ran MGM along with Louis B. Mayer, died, I think he was 39 years old, 37 or 39, but I believe he also died the same age as George Gershwin did, and around the same time. And what Thalberg believed was, and this was when MGM was churning out, a picture a week or pretty close to it. He believed that it was the responsibility of the producers, and I will use that term in a broader sense, studio, to not only release movies that were obvious crowd pleasers, but that the audience deserved to see things, and the studio had a responsibility to make movies that weren't necessarily for everybody, but had something to add to the culture of the world that we live in. And that always was something that I admired. There's an Irving Thalberg Award at the Academy Awards, which is given to the producer who is, most contributed. I can't remember exactly what the words are, but it's a producer who has contributed to the art of filmmaking as a producer. There were certainly those producers like Zanuck, who was also a studio head, David Selznick. And as far as producers who I admire, the name that comes to mind for me is a guy named Frank Marshall. And
oh yeah, sure.
And Frank, I met. He was a young producer. I think it may have been one of the first movies that he was the line producer of, on The Warriors. And I worked on that film as a production assistant.
I remember.
And yeah, it was right out of film school. And Frank was very kind to me. And over the years we have stayed friends. And the great thing about Frank is he knows everything about how to make a movie from soup to nuts. He's great with material. He picks great material. He serves the movie. He serves the director. He serves the studio with an elegance that very few producers of that magnitude have done. And he has, worked with some of the greatest directors of all time. Obviously, he founded Amblin with his wife, Kathy Kennedy, who's also an incredible producer, and Steven Spielberg. There are lots and lots of producers whose work I admire, but at the moment that name, jumped into my head because I'm so fond of him, not just based on the work that he's done, but based on the kind of human being that he is.
This question just came through. Different subject. Is it true that you're making a Sesame Street movie?
I am involved in the making of the Sesame Street movie. I'm one of a number of producers on that. And the primary producer on that movie, the person who's leading the charge, is a producer and director by the name of Sean Levy, whose work I'm sure you know.
Of course.
Interestingly enough, we were at that time on this movie, my partner Guyman Cassidy and I were going after the rights. We found out that Sean was going after the rights. We're all friends, we all know each other, and we decided we would work together. But the real, heavy lifting has been Sean. So I am associated with the film as a producer. I'll probably take an executive producer credit because I'm not doing the lion's share of the work, and it's really Sean that's done the work on the movie. But yes, the movie we're supposed to make in 2023.
Have they ever done a Sesame Street movie? I know they've done
Well,
Muppets.
yeah.
They've done the Muppets.
That Bird, I think.
Okay.
My old friend Ken Pappas directed that movie. There've been a couple.
I went to college. I went to college with Ken.
Are you going to do a dark version of Sesame Street? Like
no, we will
they
not.
did with Batman. You're not going to do like a dark.
No,
well, I have a serious question for you, Mark. What about the Sesame Street project attracted you? That doesn't jump to me. But what is this behind the scenes? Is this the story of Sesame Street?
I can't tell you what the story's about because I don't want to spoil it. But
all right, but what about this project made you say, "Hey, this has legs"?
These
big bird legs.
From a I have a young child. I have older kids. I have a younger child who's 8, and it's been years and years since we first started trying to put this thing together, and that was at the time that my young daughter Julia was watching Sesame Street, and I can't remember the year that Sesame Street started, but those characters are wonderful and the songs are incredible, and I can sing them all. And so I think the idea of bringing that to the big screen, and again, we started this project when people would go to the movies.
Yeah, right.
We're living in a different world now, and where this thing ends up, it's at Warner Brothers, and what screen it ends up on, I don't know. But the world has changed enormously since we started this.
Which leads us to Tom G's question.
Good one.
Do you think that network TV can survive competition with streaming services?
Well, network TV is evolving. It needs to evolve. I think the answer is yes, but I think that look, the answer is yes because people are still watching it, because people are still making money on it, because advertisers are still selling commercials, and I don't know what percentage of the country doesn't want to pay for Netflix or Showtime or HBO or all the other streaming services, because if you start to add them up, it's not inexpensive. I mean, if you get them all, you're talking hundreds of dollars a month. Those $10 and $12 monthly fees with the 8 or 9 streaming services, they add up.
Right.
There is still the programming that is on network television is still attracting a large audience,
but an older audience.
Yes, an older audience, and what that means is the value of the commercial time is worth less, but it's still a big business. I'll ask you guys a question, which might be fun for the audience as well. Do you know why?
I am wearing pants.
Yes, you are, and I can't see you, but I'm going to imagine that you are. In my fantasy, you're wearing pants.
Sorry, I'm just the heckler. I'm like the two guys in the balcony. I'm a heckler.
Do any of you know why the primary demographic for the television audience, when they talk about the prime demographic, is 18 to 49? Do any of you guys know?
Do we know why it's 18 to 40? That's because that's a pretty wide berth there. I mean, those are two different.
I think it's their.
There is an answer. I can tell you the answer.
That's what we want. I don't know
if anybody knew.
Okay.
The reason for it is that because the buying public either will begin at 18 years old to make a decision about a brand that they are interested in, up to 49 years of age, where research tells us that at that point, you're no longer particularly open to changing toilet paper or toilet bowl cleaner or any of the other things that are advertised on.
So you're off the radar at 49 because you're not going to change.
You're not completely off the radar, but that has always historically been the demo as far as what, it's like, what did the 18 to 49 audience, where are our ratings with the 18 to 49 audience? What's changed about that is that with streaming services where there's no commercials, it's all about the subscription. Who's going to subscribe? And the individual show, or specifically who's watching it, it's about who's going to write a check for $10 a month to get that service. Right. It's different.
Kenny, I'll let you ask this, John D. I just want to back
fascinating?
Up. Wonderful. I want to back up just a second, though. You touched on this, but what about movies? We have widescreen TVs. We got used to not going out. I noticed that my own movie theater has like 2 showings of a first-run movie rather than all day. Right. Are movie theaters going to survive?
Well, I think they will, but I think that it's becoming more and more difficult. If you look at the large exhibitors in this country, AMC being at the top of it, aside from that huge, run up on the stock when, what's the
I know what you're talking about.
Who was it that read?
Well, there was GameStop, and then was it AMC?
Right.
AMC. Yeah. But in any event, look, those guys were on the verge of bankruptcy, AMC, and they're the largest theater chain in the world. The fact of the matter is that I mean it's really tough. It's really tough because
they have the iconic Cinerama Dome is closing down.
Is it?
Well, it's coming back. It's going to come back.
Is somebody going to take it off? I assume it'll be like Amazon or Netflix will probably end up buying it.
Well, actually, the fact is that my understanding is that the people that own the Cinerama Dome, which are the people that own the ArcLight Cinema, are going to keep that theater open. They own. Not only do they own the name, but they own the building. They own the real estate.
Why did they close it?
Because they were going under.
Oh, so now they think that it's worth saving.
I mean, that the year that people couldn't go to the movies, or 18 months, or whatever it was, people couldn't stay in business. It was impossible, and it's shocking to me that anybody's left under the circumstances. Yeah. I mean, COVID and the closing of the window between theatrical and streaming has, now they're being released simultaneously. I mean, Why would you go to most movies if you could? Now, you might go see Batman, you might go see Dune, you might go see, it's almost like saying, do I want to spend X amount of dollars to go to a Broadway show? Well, not if it's a 3-character drama, but I'll go and see, 40 dancing girls in 42nd Street, and it's a spectacular kind of thing these days.
John D asks, with regard to Death on the Nile, how was the experience being involved in that film and its previous film, Murder on the Orient Express? And are you looking forward to more Poirot films with Branagh?
Well, I hope there will be more. I think the real question is going to be
his mustache.
Well, that's always at the top of the list. But no, the fact is that this movie was finished years ago, and it hasn't been released for the reasons that we discussed. And so I don't know whether the studio is going to be interested in making any more. The Murder on the Orient Express was extremely successful. It did 400 plus million, I believe, theatrically. And of course, that creates real value on the streaming side. Now the question is, will Death on the Nile be released? And will it be released only on a Disney platform because that's who owns the movie? And, and will they want to put it on the platform? And will that be bad for the overall association with Disney to release that movie? So I just don't know. I think we were all hoping that if this one were successful, that there would be more, and there were plans to do more. But at the moment, I don't know the answer.
All right.
I'm going to ask a question that I'm curious about. It hasn't come up yet. We have other questions. But if somebody asked you and they wanted to be a filmmaker, what movies do you suggest they watch?
Well, gosh, listen, I'm going to not answer that question specifically because it's my prerogative to do so. And I'm going to tell you the movies that specifically were seminal. There's that word again. For me.
Well, that's what I meant. Yes.
Is that what you meant? That may not be the question.
Sure,
but I'm
that works.
Right. I watched the first movie that I remember being sort of knocked out by was It's a Wonderful Life. I watched it as a young kid, and I was incredibly moved by that, and still am every time I watch it.
And that was not a hit when it came out, right? Am I correct?
Sweet Pea, I'm on live TV. Would you like to come and say hello?
Yes.
It's time for dinner. Well, I have to finish the show, but when I'm finished with the show, I'll come and eat dinner.
This is live TV. No.
Yeah, what is for dinner?
We're having what?
Will she make an appearance?
Casserole.
What do you
have her make an appearance?
I have no idea.
Come on, come and say hello. Come and say hello to the folks in television. This is my daughter Julia.
Hi, Julia.
Turn around, say hello.
Julia, we actually had lunch together. We would go to Art's
She
Deli.
tried to forget, Kenny. She tried to forget.
No. Remember that market?
Our favorite restaurant is Art's Deli.
I know. We would take you out to Art's Deli, and you would behave. And Mark would say, "I'm bringing Julie with her," and I would go, "Julia with us," and I'd go, "Oh no, he's bringing his kid." And then you would come and you would sit there, and she was so well behaved and quiet. Mark was crying constantly, but you were just so sweet. And I was like, "Wow, this kid's amazing." I have pictures of it, actually.
An amazing child.
Julia, do you remember that lunch with Kenny?
No,
Do,
she was a
do,
baby.
do you remember it?
No.
No. See, you forgot it. I'm sorry. Sorry that I ruined your memory, Kenny.
And I'll be down. Would you close those doors, sweetie? Julia, come on now. I'm not rude at all. I'm just asking you to do something for your father.
This is priceless.
Close them both.
Wait. Hey, I got a question. This question just came in. I don't know. Did we finish the answer to that last one?
I'll whip through it to get there.
Whip through it. So I got a question.
It's
just came through.
It's a Wonderful Life. The Godfather. When I was 16, I was completely.
I still am.
By that. French film by Jean Renoir, Rules of the Game. Then I would say probably Days of Heaven, because of the visual nature of it, and maybe Preston Sturges's movie Sullivan's Travels, one of my favorites, and Raging Bull. Those were the early films for me that really
great list.
completely
exactly
knocked me out.
what I was curious about. Yeah.
Eichman 74 asks, do you have Eichman? Did you ever have?
I gotta just say one thing. If I get
yes,
Eichman. How does he spell it?
Ikeman.
With a
Ike,
sticker.
like,
No,
do you like
know
Ike?
if he was,
I'm with Ike.
If he was any relation to Adolf Eichmann, who was one of the.
No.
I just didn't.
It is not EICH.
When I hear Eichmann, it just.
This is like I like Ike, like Eisenhower Eichmann.
I get it. I like Ike.
Eichmann, whom I assume is a man. Did you ever have a producing rival? And I think that's an interesting question. Is there a competitive relationship out there for you?
You know, that's a really good question. I would say that sadly, and this is not something that I'm proud of, but like many neurotic Jewish producers like myself, okay, we compete with ourselves, but there is a time in your life where you're looking around, and I think we all have this no matter what job we do, and you go, oh, why am I not doing that? Or why is he doing that? Or why is this person ahead of me? Or gee, I haven't done enough yet. Or wow, this guy just had a giant hit, he made a fortune. And you know, to quote Mel Brooks, where's Leo Bloom's share? From the producers, by the way. And so what I would say is that I've been very fortunate in my career. It took me a while to not feel competitive with everybody. And I'm, at 65 years old, I'm a little more relaxed. I feel like I've accomplished quite a bit and feel comfortable and satisfied with my career.
Well, was there somebody?
Yeah, we're waiting for the name.
Yeah, we're waiting.
There's no individual. There's no individual. I think it was Eichmann, Adolf Eichmann.
Eichmann Pictures. Yeah.
What about Weinstein? I'm going to ask you about Weinstein, Harvey Weinstein. Would you say that?
Okay, what are you going to ask?
You can say whatever. You can ask me whatever you want. I'll tell you what I know.
Well, did you ever work with him?
I worked with him a few times, actually. I never actually made a movie for either Miramax or the Weinstein Company, but I did work with him 2 or 3 times on films that I had made and been involved in the financing of that he distributed. Both at when he was at Miramax and then when he started the Weinstein Company. And none of them were particularly successful. And my experience was fine. There's nothing particularly interesting about my experiences with Harvey Weinstein as far as the, work that I did with him.
But were there undercurrents or people talking about his reputation back then? Yes, I get you probably never had that personal experience, but I'm just wondering if those kind of things started to bubble to the top.
Listen, everybody knew that Harvey Weinstein was a sleazeball. And when I say sleazeball, let's put aside whatever your feelings about his business practices might be. He was a sleazeball when it came to, hitting on women. I would say that most people, and I can say that I'm one of those people, knew that he was a sleazeball, but I think most people didn't have any idea what he had done and what he was capable of. We just thought he was a horny old bastard who was trying to get laid, and I don't think most people were aware of what went farther than that. I'm sure some people did, by the way. And, I don't know them and I've never had a conversation with anybody who has, but my experience and my awareness of that, I never saw it personally, but I know that he was a sleazy guy.
Do movies today, when you're in production, there's a whole list of people that have to, I guess, I don't know if they're human resources, but they're watching people's behavior and making sure that, people are respected and there's no, bad
Right.
behavior and all that
Right.
stuff going on.
Right.
Is that like a role that is on like most movies nowadays, that you just have somebody who is
You know,
monitoring everybody's behavior?
well, you have people who are involved when there are sex scenes in a film, an intimacy coach, an intimacy counselor in the theater and on movies and in television. Look, we live in a world, for better or worse, and I think you can decide for yourself whether it's better or worse in any particular circumstance. That is, there's a high level of sensitivity about many things. We see it every day, whether it's Dave Chappelle, whether it's other comedians, whether it's scripts or television shows or depiction about people that there are that people don't like or are made uncomfortable, and consequently, we're in a revolution right now.
Yeah.
And what I can say is that I believe wholeheartedly that there was a need and is a need for this revolution. The way we treat each other, not just in film and television, but in the world, is appalling.
Yes.
And what you see is sometimes bystanders get hurt too, which doesn't mean the revolution shouldn't exist, because I believe that the greater good is being served, that this is my own personal opinion, by these multiple revolutions. And they are necessary because we've got a lot of work to do in this country, in the world, in the way we treat each other. But so to answer the question, it's a long-winded way of saying is, yes, there are lawyers, there are coaches, there are a number of people who are trying their best to make sure that we are being respectful of each other, both the people that are making the films and the people that are watching them in television.
I think that was an absolutely beautiful answer. Maybe we are going a little too far sometimes in a place that it seems unnecessary. But I think you're right. The revolution is necessary, and I believe we will pull back where it's appropriate.
Well, I'd like to see movies and television address civility more, because I think,
yeah. I mean, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it's gotten to the point that people just hate each other. You can't go to a baseball game. You see it on TikTok. You see fights at baseball games. I went to a football game here. I wouldn't take my grandson to a football game. These people are crazy.
I think there's somebody that we can thank for that behavior.
I know that's true, but I
think. And who do you think that is?
Well, I think Trump. He made it okay to be a bad, to be mean, to be a bully.
Childish.
Yeah.
But I also think that part of it, and I actually wanted to talk about it on our show, Gary, which is there used to be a decorum to things. People would dress up if they wanted to go out, and it showed a little bit of respect for things.
Yeah.
But now you go on, wherever you go, whether it's even the movie, go to a theater or on an airplane, people are wearing their pajamas.
You sound like an old guy.
I am an old guy. I know, but I'm trying to figure out why there is no more civility.
Well, what I would
you
say
fucking bastard.
Ken, listen. What I would say is, if people could be nice to each other, I don't give a fuck what they wear on the airplane. So what I would say is, civility and appropriate behavior, I don't see them as the same thing. What I'm so distraught by is that, and I'm not saying that it didn't exist before, but here we have somebody who dealt with people in a guttural way, who got down and dirty, and what's happened is that he made it, I'm not blaming it all on him, but made it acceptable to treat people and talk to people like garbage. And what's happened is it's now become part of the day-to-day way we communicate with each other.
Well, I don't think he led the charge. He was part of the charge. He came around because I think we were already there. I think that 24/7 and Fox News and the echo chambers of social media have created a landscape where everybody just says and does whatever they want without taking responsibility.
And now it's the norm, sadly.
Right, correct.
You know, you would never have a politician call the president names. I mean, it was just not done. And you wouldn't have the president of the United States, you know, calling people what he called people. It's like a loser, and you know, even those kinds of things. It's like, this isn't the way you handle yourself. And now it's everywhere, and it is very disturbing. And Ken, I agree with you. It's really, it's upsetting that we live in such a world.
We have seen movies and television be a very powerful force in pointing out things that are going on in society that maybe we need to look at. And I'm not sure that we've seen civility or the way we talk to each other or trying to point out to people that, you know, this is an issue, a big issue in our country.
Well,
which brings me to one other question.
I'll point something out, which I'm sure you guys are all fans of. But Ted Lasso is a show that I think we all love, because it's so great that show is successful,
and we love it for the same reason.
Exactly.
For that optimism.
Because people are kind to each other.
Yeah.
And it works.
Absolutely.
That's a great example of, I think, what you're talking about.
And it's saying that people are hungry for it. We are starving for it.
Yes. But I'm going to ask you another question.
Make it quick, Ken. We're running out of time.
Oh, do we have to be done in an hour? Okay.
Yes.
In 2 minutes. Okay. Squid Game, biggest hit on television. Have you seen it?
I have not.
You haven't seen it. Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm just curious. It's like, now this thing, I think it's great that Netflix brings all of these international shows to our attention. We never would have had that before. You know what I mean? I think that's fantastic. I was just, but again, it's a Hunger Games kind of thing. It's not about civility. It's about shooting
people with arrows. Right.
Yeah. But anyhow, I was just curious if you had seen it.
All right, I want to acknowledge everybody that wrote in, because if somebody watched the show and they didn't get their question, Matthew C. a long time ago asked me, what was the Frontier Gynecologist sketch? What would it have been about? You guys have no idea what he's talking about, do you? Drew Barrymore. Frontier Gynecologist sketch. Drew Barrymore hosted the show, and in the cold opening, they said the standards and practices said we cut some sketches, and one is the Frontier Gynecologist, because Drew is only 7. And at that moment, I take off my cowboy hat and I pull off my rubber gloves, and they snap, and the audience laughs. That was the Frontier Gynecologist. There would have been no sketch. In my mind, the Frontier Gynecologist was a Frontier Gynecologist, but it was never going to go farther than that opening and the laugh with rubber gloves.
I would like to see it.
Well, Drew Barrymore, top of the show, 1985. I think we're out of time, and I know that Julia wants you for dinner. So, Mark, you've got to go to dinner. I want to thank everybody for watching our live show, for participating. There were some other questions. We're going to do this again. But meanwhile, you can catch us on DBNA TV, streaming television, our YouTube channel with Facebook streaming, where you can watch this again. You can archive it. Spotify, iHeartRadio. What else, Kenny? What else are we on? All your basic popular podcast channels.
I'm on antidepressants.
Very good. Kenny will remain on antidepressants. I love it when Kenny's high on a show, by the way. Do you know Kenny when he's high, Mark? Back in college? Yeah. It's a good Kenny.
Can I squeeze a 30-second story in about Mark? I have to do this. All
right. You got 30 seconds.
Okay. Mark and Renee and I, when we were doing a show on Manhattan Cable, I was very entrepreneurial, and I got the Village Head Shop to sponsor a commercial. And so I went in, and he gave me all of the stuff at the Village Head Shop, bongs and pipes and whatever. And I put it in my loft, and I left Renee and Mark there to shoot the commercial. And I went out or whatever, and I came back a few hours later, and I opened the door, and you couldn't breathe. It was so all over the place. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? And him and Renee were puffing on this bong and all of the paraphernalia that the Village Head Shop had given us for them to shoot the commercial. And he was like, Mark turned to me and said, hey, we got to try it out, make sure it works.
I will say this. We broke the bong. We broke it.
That's right.
You broke it. One of those things that you would shove the smoke in your mouth as a carburetor. We broke it, and we thought we had shot some footage, but we were so high that we couldn't thread the camera the thing in the tape deck properly, and it didn't turn out so well.
Yeah, but it was the beginning of your producing career.
It was.
Hey, will you guys have me back? I love.
Well, we love talking to you so
Oh,
much.
wow.
It's fascinating. Mark, you're such a kind gentleman,
He's
so
a great
successful.
guy.
It's just
I love you, buddy.
you're a font of
Thank
wisdom, sir. Thank you so
you're
much.
Very sweet.
Julia, thank you, daughter, for being so patient.
Bye,
Well,
everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for
Thank
watching,
you.
for listening. Whatever you do, we'll see you next time on the Gary and Kenneth Show.